1947年トルーマン大統領以来、歴代大統領と各政府機関の最高責任者で構成され、今なお活動を続けているとされる MJ-12 とは一体何か。 UFO 現象、地球外生物におけるさまざまな情報を操作し、決してその存在を明らかにしない MJ-12。 真実を知りながら平然と地球を操る男たちがそこにいた。 MJ-12 発足当初からより親密な関係にあった CIA 長官、その要職にかつていた第41代合衆国大統領ジョージ・ブッシュ。彼は1989年7月、突然火星への有人飛行を言明。今なぜ火星なのか。そんな彼を中心に活動を続けているとされる MJ-12 を過去のあらゆる資料データをもとに今ここに再現。真実が明らかにされる時が来た。国家の安全を図るため、これから述べることは国家の機密事項を劇的に描いたものである。また我々はその機密に関して政府高官からの指示に従い協力するものである。しかし我々は来るべき将来起こるであろう未知からの挑戦が何であるのかを知る権利があると信じている。地球は世界統一、自由、平和への望みを持てる時代に到達した。21世紀は我々を取り巻く宇宙と意志の伝達を図る時代であると言えるのだ。
So, ladies and gentlemen, we're just going over our contingency plan for South American elections.
Gentlemen, let's get down to business. The purpose of this meeting is to bring the President up to date on the activities of the MJ-12.
Before we start the meeting, I'd like to introduce the minister, who most of you already know. I've invited him to attend this meeting for the first time to get the religious viewpoint on the matter of UFOs and extraterrestrials.
Mr. President, as you know from the time you were a member as director of the CIA, the Majestic 12's top secret charter was to gather, disseminate, and present to the President evidence of worldwide contact with UFOs. We've all been handpicked to evaluate the ramifications of contact with the extraterrestrials, to answer the question, who are they and why they're here?
Gentlemen, proceed.
On June 24th, 1947, a civilian pilot flying over the Cascade Mountains, that's in Washington State, observed 9 flying disc-shaped aircraft traveling at formation at high rate of speed. This sighting was the first. Many reports filtered down to J. Edgar Hoover since Franklin Roosevelt times, but they could only be attributed to some uneducated, poor people. Nobody paid attention to a hunter, to a farmer, until the fourth sighting was reported by the pilot. Incidentally, the similar situation I observed in the Soviet Union when I served for some 30 years as CIA head.
Well, the problem with trusting these people is when they come to the authorities, they are in a state of panic. By the time they calm down enough to talk about their frightening experiences, their protective friends and relatives convince them that they've been brainwashed. They go into a state of self-denial, convincing themselves that it didn't really happen.
This is the same phenomenon that happens with extremely religious people. When they've had a vision or seen an angel, it changes their lives and they realize that can never be the same.
With all due respect, we're not talking about visions. We're talking about UFOs, which are real.
So are their visions of God.
Once the media gets a hold of the story, they make it seem like the person who saw the UFO is crazy. Now, not too many people can withstand the infamy of being sold all over the front pages of newspapers and magazines.
What about the ones that go public?
Whitley Strieber, Bud Hopkins, and Ruth Montgomery have all written bestsellers. Of course, the establishment discredits them. Both Lee and Britt Ehlers have some incredible UFO videotapes, and they've published Billy Meyer's photos. Most scientists are extremely conservative, and we want to keep them that way. They come to us for the answers.
That's good for us. Otherwise, we would have a hell of a time to keep it all under wraps. Even as the Soviet Union, it's impossible. That Gorbachev, glasnost, perestroika.
Oh, I can just imagine what 60 Minutes would do with the story. Anyway, after the pilot story came out, a public reaction bordered on hysteria. Then a local rancher reported a UFO crashed in Mexico, New Mexico, about 75 miles northwest of Roswell Army Air Base.
We recovered most of the wreckage. As a matter of fact, I think we've recovered all of the wreckage except for a few small pieces that the locals picked up. 4 small human-like creatures had ejected from the aircraft before it exploded. Unfortunately, by the time we discovered the bodies, they were badly decomposed from the elements and from predators, but we still had enough to examine.
How did you keep the news media out of it?
Now, in those days, the media didn't go after stories like bloodthirsty vampires. They knew their place.
I was on the base at the time, and I remember reading a front-page story about the UFO crash in the local Roswell newspaper.
Yeah, the story got out, but we put a stop to it right away. We told the news media that it was nothing more than a misguided weather research balloon, and they fell for it.
Their blood was a colorless, syrupy liquid with no red blood cells. Seemed as if they were constructed. Dr. Bong's team concluded that they weren't Homo sapiens, but some other life form.
Of course, aliens look different from us because they were all developed differently in their planet.
Some of them look quite human.
For many years, we've found cave paintings and stone sculptures of extraterrestrials on every continent. The Hopis even modeled their Kachina dolls after them.
We already have enough top-secret video footage of UFOs and ETs to verify their existence.
Well, we had a devil of a time when one of our carriers saw UFOs. All the men were strongly warned to forget what they saw because it never happened.
We hushed over the 1975 incident in Maine at the Loring Air Force Base. The 2 men who had the alien encounter and lost their teeth made the local papers. But the 100-foot UFO was kept quiet until the damn Freedom of Information Act revealed it.
Our biggest problem right now is how to handle the news of all those perfect burnt-out circles where the UFOs landed on that farm in England. Now, every tabloid reporter in Great Britain has copies of photos of the field.
The ETs are waiting, I think, for our collective consciousness to expand before they contact us on any massive scale. But when people realize how exploited they are, law and order may become irrelevant. You can just push people so far.
I'm Wendell Stevens, retired Lieutenant Colonel in the United States Air Force. I was...
元空軍大佐である彼は、軍に在籍当時より UFO 現象を研究し、現在まで多くの調査を行っている。UFO 研究家である彼の数ある調査の中でも、1978年サウスカロライナ州チャールストンにおける UFO との遭遇事件は、そこに住むウィル・ヘルマン氏が UFO に連れ去られるというセンセーショナルな事実を報告している。その全容とは。
A case doesn't become real to me, though, until I have found independent corroborating evidence, something that the original witness knows nothing about, hopefully from witnesses who know nothing about the other witness, the one I'm studying, other things that have been seen or happened around him that he couldn't control. Now, if I find those things happening, then the case is clearly beyond his ability to fake. And then it becomes interesting to me, and I spend time and effort. One of the more interesting ones was a case that started in Charleston, South Carolina in 1978, involved Mr. William Herman, and he observed this light flying a strange triangular pattern, and the pattern was sharp angular turns with quick reversals up and down, and when he focused it in his binoculars and looked at the light, it zoomed in and filled the whole screen, the whole view in the binoculars, and that astounded him. It scared him. He thought it was going to hit him. He fell back and stumbled and thought he was falling. And when he looked around, he was in a beam of blue light and ascending up the beam of light into an object, the huge circular object that was filling the sky, 70 feet in diameter. And he lost consciousness as he reached the bottom of the craft and woke up sometime later on an examining table with strange creatures around him. He saw strange little men, and another one was standing at his shoulder and one by his foot, and one was operating a device. And they frightened him at first because he'd never seen any creatures like this before. It seemed to be making changes in his life, but it was also became a problem in his area because his church took a position that all UFO phenomena were manifestations of the Antichrist, that they were diabolic, and therefore he was in league with the devil, and it actually cost him his job several times. Most people will take a position, well, if the government says it isn't real, then it isn't real. And so it only travels in very small circles who are actually involved, who are already sworn to secrecy. We have substantial evidence that the Russians have captured vehicles and bodies. They're studying them at a place called Norilsk on the Yenisei River up above the Arctic Circle, northern part of Siberia. The Chinese have captured craft and bodies. I suppose that a number of other countries do have them too, but strangely, in a number of cases, we have managed to get the crash residue from other Western-oriented countries, not from China or Russia. Actually, I don't think our government is hostile to extraterrestrials. I think that they have had a desire to capture a live one and to capture a vehicle that's operational to study and try to duplicate. And I think it's as simple as that. I don't think we wanted to kill them. I think that we wanted to get their technology any way we could, and we seem to have gotten some.
I've been involved in investigative work all my life, 15 years private investigator. Last 10 years I've been involved in an investigation out of Switzerland involving a UFO case, a contact case. And I first got involved with this through a friend of mine, ex-Air Force man, Lieutenant Colonel Wendell Stevens, retired Air Force military intelligence. He got me interested in the subject of UFOs, and fascinating subject. We've done a lot of work in that field. The Billy Meier case involves a Swiss farmer. In 1975, his contacts began with extraterrestrials from a star system they named as the Pleiades. Mr. Meier, what made the case so fascinating to us as investigators was the fact that Meier was able to document through hard evidence most of his contacts and parts surrounding the Billy Meier case. For example, he provided us investigators with not only the best photographs you've ever seen in 35 years of record keeping, but also movie footage, 8mm movie footage, sounds of the beam ship, the craft, over 40 witnesses.
So I've journeyed to Switzerland to see him, and I was invited to come back, and I stayed there for quite a period of time and got to know him quite well, and I guess you'd say I'm somewhat of an authority on Billy. Physically, he's like 5'8", 180 pounds, and a cheerful little guy that likes to watch the birds and gets up and appreciates nature. He's could remind you a little bit of something like what we think of Santa Claus. He's a happy little fellow that seems to make everybody feel like they're important. And the 20-some-odd people who live around Billy apparently have all been either handpicked or drawn there by the Pleiadians themselves because of their unique background and their incarnation chain, I suppose you might say. Well, I've always been skeptical of the pictures because who likes to be fooled? I would like to think that it's all real, but then I'd hate to wake up someday and find out, oh my gosh, Meier was faking it all along, and I just never thought of how he did it. Personally, no, there's no doubt in my mind that he is a faker. I don't believe that at all. I believe his experiences are quite real. The pictures are not models. The pictures are very real, and they've survived every computer test and every analysis anybody serious has ever done to them. And if you really want to get into all of his pictures, it will do nothing but prove that they are real. I don't think that the elders, Wendell Stevens, the people at Caltech, anybody that have ever examined them, have had any reason to doubt them. Now, that doesn't prove that they're extraterrestrial. It just proves that on the film that there's a 21-foot metal object hovering out there floating in air, defying gravity. And that's as far as we can really take it until you and I get to go right in the ship and do it for ourselves.
The Meyer experience, the bottom line to it, after everything that's been written and everything that's been said over the past 10 years, it all boils down to one thing. I think Billy Meyer had an experience. He was allowed the opportunity, and I use the word allowed, to take these photographs. And these photographs were for one thing, for one reason, and one reason only, and that is to prove that we, humans, are not the only thinking beings in this universe. And I think that there is a bottom line to the Billy Meyer case. And these photographs now have been released worldwide through Japanese, through newspapers throughout the world, and if anything, it gets people to think. And that's what it's all about, just to think.
Now, Billy Myers, a farmer from Switzerland, was chosen by an extraterrestrial group from the Pleiades star system as their key spokesman on Earth. Now, he took the best photographs we've ever seen of UFOs. He says his mission is to release hard evidence given to him by the ETs. He has an entirely different version of the Jews as the chosen people.
Now, this is the type of information I'm concerned about. It undermines the very basis of traditional religions.
In fact, many ETs don't believe in organized religion.
We have been accumulating information for years. People who have communicated with aliens usually wind up believing in God even more deeply, but they stop believing in their churches.
The problem is there are thousands of books already written about the UFO phenomena. It's impossible to keep information from leaking out, and people are starting to take the UFOs more seriously.
Luckily, the aliens and their ships look all different. So we challenge their description and spread their rumors and doubt about their existence.
The U.S. public thinks that all aliens have slanted Oriental eyes.
Maybe they'll think they're Japanese looking for real estate.
Gronk was the one who invented the name for them, extraterrestrial biological entities.
The first E.T.
My grandkids think that Steven Spielberg invented aliens.
Mine too. Maybe we should ask him to join Majestic 12, huh?
Well, I do monsters, makeup, prosthetics, special effects for films.
スティーブ・ニール SFX 映画のメイキャップアーティストとして活躍する彼は近年友好的に描かれ始めた異星人について語る。悪から善へ変化の理由は何か。果たして MJ-12 は関与しているのか。
Bad guys from space here to get us, and I really don't know why so many of the films were like that. And then all of a sudden, of course, at the end of all that, then we get things like Close Encounters and E.T., where they're happy and they're friendly and they're going to, take us out of starvation and give us higher technology. And my favorite movie in the whole world is 2001: A Space Odyssey, and I think that film more than anything probably influenced my life. At that time, I was in high school, 68, when it came out, and it really had a big influence on me. And if you look at that film, you have aliens at the beginning of it influencing humanity, and all the way through it up to the end. And I think that film just says it all. I really do. I think people should go back and look at that.
My first picture was Star Trek the Motion Picture, the first Star Trek movie. Robert Wise was the director. Paramount, of course, produced it. Blade Runner was my second involvement with feature films. Aliens was the sequel to the Ridley Scott film. Jim Cameron was the director, and I was asked to think up the idea for the Sulaco. In the first movie, the same kind of ship was the Nostromo. Before that, between Blade Runner and Tron, were Short Circuit with John Badham directing, and 2010 with Peter Hyams at MGM. When I start a new job, and I do a lot of different things, airplane design, have done some leisure design emplacements in Japan that are being built. You have to pretend temporarily that you're very dumb and relearn each time around so that you never assume that you know everything about something. That's absolutely the worst professional mistake you can possibly make. Imagination is literally the fuel that keeps the human spirit alive. It has been all through history. Activating your imagination in whatever degree of elaborateness or whatever your profession is, whether it's chemical engineering, molecular biology, molecular electronics, or painting or design, is a way of just feeding the human spirit, the curiosity, and the need to know something. That's what keeps us activated. The world is not a predictable place. Unfortunately, I suppose misery will always be with us, but my futures that I elaborately illustrate or visualize, whether it's feature films or editorial art or whatever it happens to be, I just think it's a healthier and certainly more rewarding activity to rehearse for a very nice future than it is to, I'm not a nihilist. I think we have the technical ability and the social organizational ability to design our way into a very workable, very efficient and very nice future.
Something happened to me after I first saw my first UFO, and I always wanted to be artistic. But after I had that experience, being artistic was very, very easy. It was a way of life for me, and therefore I used it the rest of my life. I became an artist, and I always wanted what it would be like living on another planet, and I've always had that question in my mind. And needless to say, that became my basis to my art form, to show the existence of possible, I mean, it's possible. They're certainly engineering sound. I've been building these colonies in these cities now for 13 years.
Dr. Vanneverbush concluded that the first UFOs were short-range reconnaissance craft and that they did not originate from any country here on Earth.
Some of the military thought that Stalin had ordered these experiments. However, the Russians were not technically advanced to pull something like that off. Now, when we questioned Werner von Braun, he said that Hitler had not ordered any such work on these kind of aircraft. However, he was very interested in UFOs.
He probably thought he could escape in a spaceship.
There was wide speculation at first that the UFOs came from Mars. The Mars project began when the Viking space probe discovered the Sea of Sidonia. There is a mile-tall, symmetrical face of a man carved in the rock. The man has on a helmet, and he's surrounded by pyramids.
So what do they really want?
ETs see themselves as being here to assist us into our next step of planetary evolution. Now, we're trying to control the interaction between aliens and Earthlings, but their goal is to establish diplomatic relations. Now, right now, they're afraid we'll steal technology for military purposes.
They're not so far wrong, are they?
The stakes are high.
There are so many different ET groups with so many different agendas, maybe up to 150 groups. If there are a few destructive ETs, we can unite with all the other groups with good intentions to fight them off.
The extraterrestrials are worried about how we're handling our planet. how atomic testing is destroying the ozone layer.
They say there are parallel universes, and our nuclear testing is disturbing their civilizations. Chernobyl is a good example. It affected everyone on Earth in ways we aren't even aware of yet. You know, we're like babies with a book of matches.
Chernobyl contaminated the whole Ukraine valley, where, as you know, they grow most of the food. And that's one of the problems, beside the political turmoil they're facing all over the country.
Well, the aliens obviously believe that every planet has to go through a nuclear power phase in their development of consciousness before they can take their place in the intergalactic system. Unfortunately, some planets never make it past their nuclear stage and destroy themselves.
What they want is power. They want to take away our ability to control the planet. They want to destabilize everything we've worked so hard to achieve.
You know, we've managed to set the aliens up as being the bad guys to keep the public in fear. But you know as well as I do that, for the most part, almost all the extraterrestrials are good.
A lot better than us. Virgil Armstrong suggested if aliens come for you and you react with fear, they'll take you away. But if you tell them that they're violating universal law by interfering with your free will, then they'll release you unharmed.
We've been trying to ascertain their method of propulsion, where their power source comes from and how it's transmitted. The UFOs don't seem to have any conventional method of guidance. Not only that, there's no internal wiring, or vacuum tubes, electronics, or computer chips. Now, some of them use a form of magnetohydrodynamics to ionize the gases around the ship, causing it to glow in many different colors.
What we couldn't do if we had the ability to build missiles like their ships, huh?
I think we have enough power to devastate the Earth as it is.
The best defense against war is a strong offense.
We have had a strong offense for 75 years, and it has not kept us out of any wars.
Our missiles are the only thing that's kept the Soviets from messing with us. Otherwise, they'd have all of Europe by now.
Gentlemen, this isn't the 60s.
Well, there have been several UFOs which have crashed in the past, but none recently. We surmise that our early forms of radar, which used high-intensity beams, fouled up their guidance system. God knows how bad the Russian radar was back then. We were emitting too much radiation in those days.
We've improved our radar, and they've improved their ships. A UFO was shot down over South Africa with a laser. We were right there to get the power system for study. For some reason, the ETs haven't retaliated.
Well, the first UFOs we found were made of an oil-like metal that formed a very malleable, tough coat. They were as light as balsa wood and had sort of a dull aluminum glint. They were as thin as aluminum foil, and they would straighten themselves out when they were crinkled up. You couldn't break them, and you couldn't cut them.
We've been trying to find other UFOs, but they rarely crash. When we vector in on them, they go up into hyperspace, they disappear, and then they reappear in another place.
We've shot at them, but our shells just flatten out on their shields. They never fired back or attacked us.
There have been UFO reports from every state in the country, including Alaska, Hawaii, even Puerto Rico. Virtually every nation has reported sightings, either officially recorded or as part of their national folklore.
A lot of myths say the aliens will come again. The Mayans had sophisticated astronomy and charted the planets. We make fun of folklore, but a lot of it is true.
David, these theories call into question our version of the creation of the universe.
Especially if there were human-like life forms before man.
God created man in his own image, not like some reptilian alien.
Maybe he doesn't look like us. We could be his biggest mistake.
And I don't think that calling into doubt the very existence of God is any laughing matter.
It isn't. We're just laughing because there's a lot we just don't know about life.
A lot.
Nevertheless, we do have firm evidence of new UFO landings here in the U.S. in a dozen different locations.
We found one alien alive in a crash. Now, he lived until 1972 when he died of unknown causes.
People expect all aliens to look alike because we've conditioned them that they all come from one planet.
It's better to keep the public thinking in terms of black and white, us versus them. That way we can keep the concept of good and evil clear.
The aliens all look different because they come from different planets. A lot of them tend to have long arms which reach down below the knees. Their extremities are thin because they don't need to do manual labor, don't have to deal with as much gravity. Their heads are larger than ours. They have developed telepathic powers, so they don't need to communicate with words.
We've been studying the UFOs we have stored in Hangar 18. We even had one of them working in Pine Gap, Australia. It flew okay in our atmosphere, but as soon as we took it to space, it exploded. But I do really feel that we're making progress.
Extraterrestrials have found a way to reconstruct atoms. We're trying to duplicate the process.
Good.
Kayla, the biggest problem we have to deal with are people who claim to have talked to aliens or to have been taken away in their spaceships. They're getting just too much worldwide attention.
NASA once issued a directive making it illegal to talk to aliens.
It's becoming dangerous. Too many people know about the UFOs and are beginning to believe the evidence. Now, our spin campaign has been successful in convincing people that if they don't exist, that they're dangerous. Now, we could lose control of the situation, and it could lead to mass panic.
I'm the president of the National Investigations Committee on Unidentified Flying Objects, headquartered in Van Nuys, California.
フランク・ストレンジャー博士、カリフォルニア州バンネイズに拠点を置く UFO 国家委員会の委員長である彼は、驚くことに国防総省内で自分は金星から来たと語る人物と接触したことがあると話す。また UFO は全て宇宙からの訪問者ではなく、人間の創造の産物であったり、ある国家の発明によるものも含まれている可能性があると指摘する。その根拠は、
I think it's the responsibility of world governments to conduct a true scientific investigation into the UFO phenomena and then present this information in total to the citizens of their particular nations, and to be truthful with them. Now, no nation is doing that right now. Right now, we have entered a conspiracy of silence. In the UFO field, the silence, God knows for what reason, but the people have a right to know the truth, and that's what I believe. Here we have over 1,000 declassified sheets of paper that gives us fact, figures, names, dates, and places, not just in the United States, but other parts of the world, of UFO sightings, UFO communication, UFO abductions, all kinds of accounts, all kinds of stories, most of them reported by business and professional and military people. I would like to relate to you something that is in the CIA documents, and that is a meeting that I had at the Pentagon in Washington, D.C. with a fellow who claimed to come from the planet Venus. And that's in the CIA documents. And not only has it been verified by the CIA, but also a gentleman who was an officer of the Project Blue Book, whose sole task it was to record with accuracy the fact that this man, Valiant Thor, landed in Alexandria, Virginia, on the outskirts of Washington, D.C., got into a police car, and was brought to President Eisenhower and Vice President Nixon. It's all a matter of record. According to the Air Force documents, there are still over 700 sightings in the United States every single week. That's an average of 100 a day. I have in my file certified documents released by the Federal Bureau of Investigation. Notice the same type of format that's used by the CIA. They cross out the names of the individuals and sometimes the locations where some of these events took place. Thousands of declassified pages from the Federal Bureau of Investigation. Two major United States federal agencies that have denied and even disavowed all knowledge or any interest about UFOs, and now because of the Freedom of Information Act, they're forced to release these pages to the public. We have a credibility gap here. Somebody is not telling the truth, and the big reason is, the big question is why? Why is this being withheld from the public? I went to Washington. I spoke to General Wiedemeyer at the Pentagon, and his answer to me was twofold. Number one, the fear of mass hysteria keeps the American government silent on UFOs. I don't believe that. The second reason given to me at the Pentagon was that if intelligent beings are coming from outer space and they can show us how to get along without sickness, disease, and even death, I was quoted that this would completely ruin the economy of the United States and plunge us into a recession of which there'd never be a recovery. If intelligent people are coming from other worlds, at which they are, and they are showing us ways and means to improve our own society, I say thank God for it.
In 1982, while an investigator for the state of Idaho, we had a series of mutilations that were occurring with cattle mutilations. This is an occurrence that's been going on off and on and has been reported in the American press since at least 1967, when a very famous mutilation occurred down in Colorado with a horse by the name of Snippy. The mutilation to be classified as a classic mutilation involves an animal that has been, number one, the body fluids have been drained from the animal. Number two, there are a number of classic mutilation cuts that occur. Usually these encompass the removal of an eye or both eyes, partial removal of the skin and muscle from the face, the removal of the sexual organs from the animal, and in some cases a piece of hide which can encompass an area the size of several inches on each side will be excised from the animal. Not once, ever, has anyone been caught or prosecuted. When I came across the first human individual that had been found dead and mutilated with the very same characteristics as the animal mutilations, the very first thing I did was try to verify this to find if in fact there were any correlation between it. I had a very good friend who was a police detective with a municipal department in Idaho, run a check through NCIC, which is a National Crime Information Computer, headed by the FBI back in Washington, D.C. He showed him my text file, my news story on this, and he said, "This seems so ludicrous as to be unbelievable. Do me a favor and run a search on this." The man that was with the Department of Justice got back to him in 2 days, and he told him, and I have this on file, he said, "If I were you, I'd stay completely away from this. This is too hot to handle. If you contact me again, I'm going to have to report you to my superiors, my supervisors." And we're talking about two people that were best friends. So there is something to this subject that somewhere someone finds very troubling, and they don't want this to get out.
In 1965, I was in the Air Force, and I was stationed in Colorado Springs. And we were called out on a very exclusive mission, and we were said, "We do not know, as far as you will not know where you're going, and as far as that you will have people on board and that you'll take care of them. And when you get to this destination, you're not to ask any questions. And whatever you hear or see there is to remain confidential and, in fact, classified information." And here before my own eyes was a UFO and two beings. And what was just tremendously exciting about this whole thing is that it was real. And we had two senior Air Force officers on board. We had a high-tech scientist. We had a group out of Wright-Patterson, which was the science base of the Air Force. And just, like I said, there was so much excitement. I could see the beings, and in describing them, I can only say, as far as the heads were larger than as we described them, very smooth, oval-shaped and thinner down in this area. The eyes were larger, and what we would expect as a mouth was not a mouth. It was basically just kind of a curvature of a line. If you close the mouth and take the lip line, the center lip line, that's basically what you saw. And the ears were not pronounced as ours are and everything. It's closer and not stuck out. Communication was telepathic. It was a situation that you knew you were communicating, and that they were trying to let you know, as far as in my experience, that they weren't going to hurt me. There was communication, there were questions and answers, and it was a situation about what did I feel about them. And it's just as I told you. I think it is unique. I think it's exciting. I look forward to the experience again, and hope someday that I do have that experience again. As far as to climb on board and to go, I wouldn't have any hesitation whatsoever. None. I would do it in a second, in a heartbeat. And I'm just that excited about it.
Well, it's been about 7 years since I've been involved in UFO research, and it began when I met Dr. J. Allen Hynek. Dr. Hynek, as you know, was considered the father of UFOlogy. He was with Project Blue Book, the cataloging UFO cases with the Air Force. And Dr. Hynek was also the man who coined the phrases close encounters of the first, second, and third kind, which Spielberg used for his movie. Well, when I met Dr. Hynek, I had no experience at all or no background in UFOs, but here I was with the top scientists in the field, in the world, and he had over 100,000 cases of UFO reports on file and in his computer. We founded with Dr. J. Allen Hynek the International Center for UFO Research here in Scottsdale. We're beyond the point now of trying to prove that UFOs exist. We know UFOs exist. We know UFO contact is going on. What we're trying to ascertain now is why is a contact happening, who is contacting us, what are their purposes, and how do we get this information out to the people? Because the 90s are here. The 21st century is right around the corner. And it looks, from all the evidence we've been able to gather, that we're going to an age when there's going to be open contact on a global scale.
Our greatest fear is that if the idea of extraterrestrials is accepted, it will lead to total anarchy.
When people compare our system to how well the alien system works, it'll make the Watson-Newark riots look like picnics. The whites and blacks will be in the street together, and they'll have guns.
The NRA has seen to that.
Excuse me. I've been listening with fascination to your discussion and debate. I think you're overlooking two of the most important situations when you're dealing with the extraterrestrials. Before we can even consider whether or not we want to communicate with them, or whether we should publicly acknowledge their existence, we must face the economic ramifications of these dealings.
Go on.
Number one, the stock market will collapse, leading to a worldwide depression. And number two, the world banking system will collapse.
The only alternative is to change the direction of business and scientific technology to help us to survive.
Like the guy who developed laser tech for STI. He quit to develop medical technology to help people.
Well, once we acknowledge UFOs, we'll have to acknowledge technology. They obviously are much further advanced than we are.
Yes.
Our products and skills will become useless in comparison to theirs. We'll become a third world planet, used mostly for cheap labor and as consumers. There's nothing we have to offer the extraterrestrials they haven't already perfected. We want what they have. What we have, they won't want. The trade imbalance will be enormous.
That's true. The only thing that the aliens might want from us is our minerals and our natural resources.
Don't be too pessimistic. They might also want to learn about our humanity, to make use of our sexual, emotional, and psychological development.
What psychological development? What humanity? Are you talking about Hitler, Stalin, the Khmer Rouge, Ceausescu?
Don't forget, we are still a race that believes in a loving God.
So did Shaw, Marcos, Somoza, and Noriega.
Gentlemen, let's be a little more kind and gentle with each other. I don't want this to deteriorate into a religious issue. Morality has nothing to do with it.
President is right. We just want to find a solution that works. Let's not get all hung up on philosophy and spiritualism, please.
That's what this meeting should be about.
I want to get back to economic issues. You predict disaster if we open communications with the extraterrestrials?
Yes. It's economically unfeasible.
Unless we can defeat them militarily and take over their resources.
In reality, we don't know what kind of weapons they have. They haven't tried to use any on us yet. But when we shot at UFOs over the ocean, they neutralized our weapons, and the weapons didn't function.
When did this happen? You never informed us.
I didn't have to. It's Navy business.
Navy business? It's our business. I mean, why shoot at them when we need their spacecraft in one piece in order to examine it?
My job is to defend this country, sir. It's more important than collecting exhibits for a museum.
But you could have ruined the possibility of terrific scientific advances.
First and foremost, it is our duty to protect the interests of the United States.
1962年2月20日、ジョン・ブレンがマーキュリー船で航行中、3機の未確認飛行物体が船尾から近づき、追い越していったのを目撃している。1962年5月24日、スコット・カーペンターはホタルのような飛行物体を目撃、カメラに収めることに成功した。1964年10月12日、3人のソ連宇宙飛行士は便速に飛ぶディスク上の未確認飛行物体に囲まれたと報告している。1968年12月21日、アポロ8号に登場するフランク・ボールマンとジム・ラベルは UFO が我々の上空10マイルに出現したと基地に伝える。1969年11月14日、アポロ12号のピート・コンラッド、アラン・ビーン、リック・ゴードンは UFO が月まで13万2000マイルの行程を我々より少し先行して飛行したと話した。デビッド・フロニング、彼は航空宇宙学エンジニアであり、25年もの間超宇宙推進システムの研究開発に専念している人物である。広大な宇宙、我々人間の宇宙への探求の思いは果てしない。しかし人間が宇宙を自在に移動するために克服しなければならないことは、サウンドバリア、音速障壁、ヒートバリア、熱障壁である。非常に速い速度で物体が移動すると、その摩擦力で鉄を溶かしてしまうのだ。そして第3にライトバリア、光障壁を克服しなければならない。遠く離れた宇宙の星々へ行くためには、光の速度でさえ何万年何億年もかかるのだ。しかし UFO はそんな星からやってくるのである。何億年もの昔、火星はかつて地球がたどってきたのと同じような過程で形成されたという。大気が激しい風と嵐によって生まれ、火山の噴火によって母なる大地が出来上がり、そして海が作られた。こうして火星は生命の住める惑星になったのだ。 しかし次第に雨は止み、海は枯れていった。とうとう火星は荒れ果てた惑星へと変化した。今火星のクレーターはかつて栄えた文明の遺物らしいピラミッドのような形をした物体に囲まれ、巨大な炎が燃えている。それらを創造した生物は今どこへ行ったのだろう。果たして地球にもそういった時が来てしまうのだろうか。宇宙開発の先駆者でジェット推進局研究所の創設者ジョン・パーソンズ。彼の未亡人は夫の事故死に疑問を投げかける。その実態とは。
My husband died in 1952 in very mysterious circumstances. Our house was blown up on the eve of our departure from the country. After 2 years of investigation by the FBI, we had decided to leave the country. And I never saw my husband's body. It has been suggested that the whole explosion was a cover-up to get him either taken as a hostage or there's been many fantastic theories because he was the most, foremost figure in space exploration, very valuable person to governments. It was not until 7 years later, after his death, when the capital of the United States was not attacked, but many UFOs circled around the Capitol building, and the Air Force was sent up to chase them, and this was some sensational news. We are going beyond the limitations and the barriers set up by Christianity concerning death. This is the prime truth that we have to establish before we can go into space. Our whole conception of time is being changed. Ultimately, this will bring us to another awareness of direction. I believe that we are being reunited with the matriarchal view of the world, which is circular, and that there is no end to anything. We've been functioning for some time as if we believed the world was based on a straight line, and if we followed that straight line, we would arrive at some destination far from us. But this is the basis of Einstein's theory, is that all things return to their origin. And this is fundamentally what the matriarchy is all about. The restoration of the circular concept of reality. So seeing ourselves from space makes us realize that there is no beginning and no ending. The sun no longer comes up in the morning and it doesn't die at night anymore. We are out in space, and this is the first step to space exploration. This lifts us out of the confines of the physical world. Eventually, we're going to have to face a new relationship to our physical bodies, because obviously we can't take our physical bodies with us. That's what they're trying to do, is transfer the physical body out there, and it won't go. All the things that we intuitively expect, we relegate it to the after-death state, but it's actually, it's actually ever present. We promise ourselves paradise, when paradise is immediate. The earth itself is a source of everything we need.
Within the last 20 years, I've focused on this particular area of trying to answer the questions, who are we, where do we come from? Zecharia Sitchin's information goes like this. If you interpret all of that information, aliens landed here. They were humanoid, taller and huskier than we are, that looked very much like we do. They came from the last planet in our solar system that now NASA and JPL is looking for. They came down, splashed down in the Persian Gulf with rocket-based technology 450,000 years ago. They literally spliced their genes with Homo erectus genes, and here we are. We have close probably to 1.5 million pieces of artifact evidence of alien presence on this earth since 450,000 years ago, and that those aliens genetically created us.
Whenever you look into history, you can find every civilization on this planet has had a tie to some star that they feel their ancestors originated in. Most of them have a direct tie to the Pleiades. The Hopi up here in northern Arizona call the Pleiades Chohocan, and Chohocan means Pleiades. They say this is where they return after they've died. The Egyptian connection to the stars is remarkable, absolutely remarkable. The goddess Nut and Geb, who created the planet according to ancient Egyptian religion and belief, one was to be from the Pleiades, the other was Earth. And all of this interlocking belief in not only the sun, but the stars as well, really brought about a remarkable thing. It's just that people are afraid to come forward and say what they want to say and say what they've seen or discuss it. I think in the 90s, that's going to begin to change. With the sighting that took place in Russia not too long ago, that's opened a lot of people's minds. All of a sudden, the Soviet Union, which is the most closed country, at least we've been raised to believe that, has suddenly come out and in their press said a UFO landed. And there are witnesses to this. So when that begins to happen, I think it's going to take a completely different perspective for everyone on this planet. I think that our science and our technology is going to get to a point where we begin to understand that we have to do what all of these ETs are telling us we have to do, and that's balance nature and ourselves, and to become more or less harmonious with our surroundings and ourselves, not to create the destruction. So I think that the 90s is going to open a wonderful door for us.
We have top secret classified files on airline pilots, business executives, teachers, scientists, priests, all of whom claim to have been taken aboard UFOs.
We've had them examined by top psychiatrists. We put them under hypnosis, given them lie detector tests and truth drugs. They're completely sane, other than the obvious stress induced by their experiences and the scorn of their peers.
We've done experiments with contactees who are withdrawn and under severe mental stress from their experiences. When sounds recorded from the UFOs are played to them, they become cheerful and more open and recover quickly. We don't know what the sounds mean, but they seem to reassure the contactees that they're all right. Their experiences that they're trying to block out are for real, believe me. They're not crazy.
They've really been on spaceships, though. There's no doubt about it.
Their experiences are filled with different details, but there are remarkable similarities in the most important basics. They're strangers to one another, so there's no chance they could have influenced each other or been subject to mass hysteria.
They're not out for money or fame. In fact, most of them we have to forcibly coerce in order to interview or test them. We have to drag the truth out of them. All they want is to be left alone.
Extraterrestrials want to make us focus on the very real problems on Earth, like the environment, starvation, disease.
Well, we've been told that the extraterrestrials are particularly concerned about the destruction of the ozone layer and the Brazilian rainforest, pollution in the oceans, excess use of chemicals, and the deteriorating condition of our nuclear plants.
There have been plenty of other planets that have disappeared over the millenniums and life forms that have become extinct. They're worried about how the Earth affects the solar system and universe as a whole.
The extraterrestrials have shown no desire to hurt us.
A number of people we interviewed claimed to be taken aboard the ship involuntarily, but some went by choice. Most wound up feeling grateful for the opportunity once they went back home, of course. But few were furious, terrified, scared.
The theory is that there are races of extraterrestrials dying out, whether from disease, inbreeding, or other unknown factors. They are desperate to perpetuate their species, and they need new blood and new genes to do it.
Women may be used for breeding to bear alien babies. Men may be used because extraterrestrials are sterile. We just don't know.
There's rumors that all this talk about seeding women may be part of our disinformation campaign.
Well, contactees are returned to Earth to act as interface between their culture and ours.
The extraterrestrials seem capable of wiping out a person's memory of their abduction. We have had to hypnotize some of them to find out what happened on the UFO.
We've been keeping files on a number of UFO groups for the purpose of national security. Now, these groups want us to release our classified documents to the press.
There could be a security leak. Somebody's secretary or lover.
A lot more people are listening. We have astronauts who firmly believe in UFOs and extraterrestrials. They've seen them.
Well, a lot of people claim to have seen God. We have to turn down hundreds of requests for sainthood and thousands of cases of miracles every year.
You burn such people at the stake and proclaim them saints in a couple of 100 years. Or they become corporate raiders.
As long as we have negative, paranoid sensationalists who want to make a quick buck and act like Nazis, this whole movement's going to remain a cult.
Hundreds of people cited boomerang-shaped UFOs in Brewster, New York. The local papers reported it, but the news never made it west of the Mississippi.
We have people at every news source to stop stories from leaking out.
We have to remain militarily prepared, especially if the extraterrestrials try to rescue us.
We must not allow the idea of superior life forms to start our people questioning their belief in higher religious authorities or to challenge the moral system that we have set up for them over the ages.
We shouldn't lose track of all the potential positive effects of communication with them. They may have solved the problems of disease and aging. We can learn a tremendous amount from them in medicine, psychology, science, education, and even human relations. How to deal with each other in peace.
Are you willing to take that risk? If we don't blow them out of the sky, they will blow us away. Are you willing to risk the planet?
Yes.
During the years of 1971 to
リチャード・マレ
1975, I was involved
彼は1971年から75年にかけてフォワードエアコントロールと呼ばれる任務に就いていた。このプロジェクトは特殊な飛行物体、つまり UFO を調査するというもので、全米各地からハワイに至るまであらゆる地域で UFO をキャッチ調査した。存在を否定しながら調査する意味は何か。
And on numerous occasions, we ran across strange flying objects that make 90-degree turns and go from 0 to 10,000 miles an hour and go completely off the sweep of our radar. And because we were mobile command, we were used many times just to monitor this activity. We found that we had an unlimited amount of budgeting all of a sudden. And we found that we had special digitizers that were attached to us that were 72-hour tapes that would be controlled, and they would be then couriered to a person that would take it and we'd never see it again. And it would go to some high command. A lot of times we had code names for everything that we did. And on many occasions, I have seen close contacts with UFOs. They've come right in close to us to let us know they're there. And everybody would bail out of their radar vans and go out and look at them. And they would just, gone. On many occasions, from Mauna Kea, the top mountain in the Big Island, we witnessed UFOs underneath the water. I mean, the military does not have a vehicle that will travel 400 to 500 knots underwater. you see. And when you see 3 or 4 illuminated balls underwater just booking, I mean, they're just traveling. And you're on the mountaintop and you see these things. It leads me to believe that not only are they on our surface, but they do base themselves underwater. On one occasion, we spotted anywhere from 50 to 200 UFOs coming out of the triangle and going across the panhandle of the state. A squadron flew over Plains, Georgia, and we understand that President Carter, at that time he was Governor Carter, had witnessed these craft. We were in space long before the space program ever started. There's a gentleman by the name of Bill Cooper who has shown photographs of Earth from the moon dated 1958 and 1959. And gentlemen, we were not on the moon and we had nothing in space until 1968. We were already developing on the moon when Kennedy was in office. General Secrecy Act is what I was blanketed under until 1982, where my life was threatened once for talking about UFOs and talking about what I knew about it. And at that time, a dear friend of mine, Colonel was then just snatched right off the street. He was put in prison for 5 years, and I went into hiding for 3 years. I just received a phone call about a gentleman who was abducted. I'm going to have an interview with this gentleman. He's somewhat scared. He was out rabbit hunting. He was hit with a beam of light, and his friend saw him get hit. Now his friend's been abducted. It's quite incredible where this is going on and how many cases of this type are going on. They're all happening up around Dreamland, which is Edwards Air Force Base. Remember this, wherever they build the most sophisticated aircraft is where they are holding alien aircraft.
For instance, last Wednesday night, my son was walking by the sliding glass door in our home, and he called me. I came over. He said, "Look," and I looked, and that mountain, which is the backside of Big Bear, 2 large lights. I mean, really large, larger than landing lights. Brilliant. I have 3 people that I know that I feel are very credible. One worked for me, and just recently she had an abduction experience from right out here. And then the other 2, one is in Barstow, which is north of where we live here. And you know, they've told me their experience, and I have no reason not to believe them. They're very credible. I know them. And I've never had an abduction experience. I personally don't want to. I'm happy with just seeing the light phenomena.
Right directly above the mountaintops in the proximity of the flags you see there, and probably the height of the top of the telephone pole, were 2 golden globes. Size was hard to determine, much larger than a star. If, in fact, they are aliens, and they have been around as long as some people seem to say they've been around, why aren't we made aware of it? If it was for good, I would think we would know about it. And someone is trying to keep this from us, and I think there's no good behind it, frankly.
When we looked up there, there was huge lights. I've never seen them so bright. And they were right up over there.
And this is a mountain out in the Indian reservation here in the valley called Red Mountain by the Indians, and considered to be one of the most sacred mountains in the area. Over the mountain came a large light pulsating, not making any noise at all. It was golden light interspersed with an emerald green color. And they all were amazed by it because it made no noise whatsoever, and then it proceeded over the edge of the mountain and flew directly in with no explosion or no crash or nothing of the sort. Well, they obviously were all wondering what it was and what could it possibly be. Well, that's not unusual here because there's been many sightings reported at this area, not only now, but in the past as well, because the Indians talk a great deal about this area and this mountain as being a place to communicate with the sky gods. UFOs just didn't start in the 1940s when it officially became the modern UFO history, but they go back as far as recorded time. It's as ancient as this land and probably as long as this land has been here. Whether they draw them on the pictures inside cave walls or they record them in their ancient script, there's always been the evidence from culture to culture It's UFOs cut across all cultural lines. It's something that everyone knows and can relate to, no matter where they are or who they are.
I used to live on a tropical island, Aruba. It's 18 miles off the coast of Venezuela. And I was walking home from the beach one day, and I must have been about a half a mile from my house, and I heard this very strange humming. And I looked up into the sky, and lo and behold, about 200 yards above me, there was a silver ship hovering and gliding along in the sky. I knew that my friends wouldn't believe me if I told them that I saw it, so I started yelling, and my next-door neighbor came out, Mr. Fredrickson, and he's about 45 years old, and he saw it with me. And we actually saw a wall of energy that went all the way up into space, and you could actually stop. It was like a wall of electron energy or something, and you could actually stop. We stopped the car, and actually were putting our hands through this wall of energy, and we were looking up the wall of energy off into space, and we felt like there might have been some kind of an energy dome over the area that we were living in. And then for maybe about a week, we were having all kinds of strange experiences on the island, strange energy fields, and there was like a whole presence, some kind of a force. I grew up in the island, so I was very familiar with the island and the feeling of the island, and there was something had definitely changed. Once you see one, you become a knower. You no longer are a believer. In the same way, if you're a Christian, let's say if you experience God, you would be a knower of God and not just a believer of God. You know, and so the thing is, once you see a ship like that, you become a knower and no longer a believer. So all of the knowledge that you're building is more to develop the understanding of that experience. Yeah.
My name is Vicki Cooper, and with my partner, Sherry Stark, I co-publish UFO Magazine, which is the most legitimate and most wide-ranging journalistic effort to cover UFOs in the United States. The combination of us accepting that there are other dimensions and that quantum theory really has something to say about the nature of reality is the same as us accepting that life may have many, many faces that we're unaware of, that we may discover as we open ourselves more to the idea of UFOs and the idea of alien life forms other than humans. We have many people on this planet, let's face it, that are still in a very primitive state of mind, okay? Collectively, this planet, the species on this planet, human beings, I think do need to grow and open up or move forward, as you say, in their consciousness, okay? However, I think there are seed beds of people who are very ready right now to accept and move into that awareness just like that.
Well, my full name is Virgil Armstrong, Postolithwaite. I go under the name of Virgil Armstrong for lecturing purposes, for writing my books and other things which I'm engaged in. I'm a retired military officer, having served 22 years in the service. I was 9 years with the CIA, 10 years with the Green Berets, and other high-level assignments with the United States government. I retired in 1962. And later became very interested in the subject of UFOs as we know them today. Prior to that, though, my direct involvement in the field of ufology had to do with an incident which took place in 1948 at White Sands, New Mexico, and was the second capture of the first UFO, I should say the second capture of a UFO here in our United States. There is amongst us a malefic group of extraterrestrials who do not have our best interest at heart. And documentary-wise, commentary-wise, and so forth, we've established that their arrival took place in the 1950s during the Truman administration. And that our government, and probably world government, made a pact with these extraterrestrials that if they were to share with us their ability to travel extraterrestrially, in other words, their technology to travel extraterrestrially, that we would in turn allow them to use our people as guinea pigs for biological research. In other words, testing them through our enzymes, genetic splices, possibly blood, and as we know now, in some cases, even spare parts, arms and legs and things of this nature. The threat that we're looking at is that these people are far superior to us in terms of mentality and technology, and through this means have controlled us as well as other world governments to enable us to do their bidding, you know, which of course is to basically farm us, if you would like. That's a very crass term, but that's exactly what it is, to farm us. Rather than fighting all of this as opposing nations as we have in the past, we now are trying to cooperate, and we're trying to live together in peace and tranquility and pacification. And as a result of this, to the great leaders, that is the great heads of government, such as Gorbachev, Reagan, and now Bush, are trying to cooperate to a degree that they can maintain stability, you know, at the same time move through this major spiritual transformation which is taking place. And that's not an easy thing to do. This man Gorbachev is to be greatly lauded because he really got his hands full. I wouldn't want his job for all the tea in China, and I don't think anybody else would either. And I'm not so sure that anybody else could handle it but him. Again, we have to look at them in their totality also as a spiritual test. Every bit of this is illusion. Every bit of this is something which is being obscured from our true sense of knowing and, I should say, knowingness. Everything lies within your heart and your mind and your soul as well as mine. We cannot ever hope to deter any and all of this physically, technologically, or mentally. It has to be done spiritually. As I've reiterated already, this is a spiritual test and a spiritual time.
I was in the military service for 27 years. And as I began my research years and years ago, I was a skeptic. And while I was in the service, and I was assigned at SHAPE headquarters in Paris, France for almost 5 years, I had an opportunity to see classified military files, study them, and I learned there, beyond a shadow of a doubt, of the reality of the UFO phenomenon. I also learned something about the commanding generals over there, developed a strong case of paranoia involved with the UFO phenomenon because they didn't know how to deal with the reality that they had discovered. They had discovered extraterrestrial visitation. I don't necessarily believe in UFOs. I know the reality of them. I've seen the facts. I've seen the evidence. But I began as a skeptic, curious, unconvinced, uncertain, and I think that was a good place to begin. It was a safe place to begin. And then as I began to learn over the years and gather more and more evidence and realize what was really happening out there, then I became convinced of the reality of it. I'm not fearful of any kind of a threat. A lot of people are. There's a strong feeling of paranoia, particularly among ranking military people and some people in government. They're convinced that we're going to be conquered and invaded and taken over. I've dug into this enough over the years that it's convinced me that we have nothing to be fearful of. That the technologies that are represented there are so advanced, and they've been serving us for so long, that if they had wanted to take us over, they would have done it a long time ago. And our so-called vaunted military prowess and our technology here would mean nothing to them. No, I'm not threatened. I don't think that that was their intent in the first place. When I retired from the service in '76, the government at that point knew of 4 separate civilizations that were visiting. And one of those cultures, biologically, the people looked exactly like we do. They could put on a suit or a coat and tie or a dress and go into a restaurant, walk down the street, and you'd never know. Unless they decided to tell you, you'd never know. And that excites me some, because I think I've met a couple over the years. I think we're related to those people. Several researchers have concluded that we may be cousins. A number of us have concluded that we are probably a seeded race here on this planet, and that they were involved not merely in our development, growth, and evolution, but they were involved in putting us here. I had an opportunity to work with Central Intelligence Agency, the National Security Agency. And I learned over the years that they have a very sophisticated disinformation program based upon the fact that they've decided not to tell the truth to the public. But there are times when the public gets awfully close to certain things. So they have to ridicule and give out disinformation to divert the public's attention from something that's legitimate into something that isn't. And I've seen that work. Some of the people I served with were involved in that program. And they're very good at it. And one of the things they use over the years in the disinformation program are the so-called crackpots that we all know so well about. There are these little groups and individuals and people all over the world who wear the little silly hats with the antenna, and they get together with the meetings, and they have parties and so on with the visitors and such. And some of them are some really fringe people, and some of them I think probably need to be cared for. Maybe they're not dangerous, but anyhow, they exist. And the government has continually pointed to them and given them a lot of attention and given them a lot of press exposure to lead people with the idea that that's the UFO phenomena. That's all there is to it, a bunch of crackpots. And the public at large and a lot of the media follow them, the crackpots, the fringe people, because they're colorful, they're exciting, they're fun. But that's not the reality of the real UFO research. It has nothing to do with the scientists and the pilots, military and civilian, and the top people in government that have spent years looking at this phenomenon and realize that it's real. There's a truth here. There are facts here. There's evidence here. And if the people take the time to really look at what's available and look at the evidence and examine the evidence, my God, we've got enough evidence that in a court of law, we have more than enough evidence to convict. But sadly, it's not that simple with the UFO phenomenon, because we are dealing with government disinformation. And some of my friends are still working for the government. And they're good. And I'm tempted to name their names, but I can't. We've retrieved several ships. One I know of in particular was a crash up near Kingman some years ago, where there was a crew of 2 aboard. One was injured and one was in good condition. They retrieved the ship, they retrieved the crew. They took the ship and the crew off to a secret government laboratory, which is not too far from Las Vegas. And they kept the 2 crew members alive for some time. It's a very sensitive subject, and if you are not particularly careful, a military person can end up at Fort Leavenworth. He can end up being sentenced to prison, he can end up being fined, he can be forfeiting all of his pay and allowances, not only what he has had, but everything he would yet to ever earn. That's a rather frightening kind of threat to hang over their heads. So a lot of my friends and associates are rather closed-mouthed about it. But as they get older, like I am, they get to a point, well, I think it's time to talk about it. Well, one of the things that troubles me the most, I guess, is that how few people really understand and have really taken the time to look at the evidence and to dig into it. There's an enormous amount of material out there that's available to people, but you do have to make an effort. You have to dig a little bit. I'm continually amazed at the number of people who simply either are not concerned, are not aware, and it doesn't seem important to them. And I don't understand that, because to me, the fact that we are being surveyed, visited, analyzed by extraterrestrial cultures is mind-boggling. The ramifications for the human race and the planet Earth are overwhelming. The fact that we are not alone, that we are a part of a much larger community. And I find that exciting. And I find that that impacts upon the future of the human race. And I cannot imagine someone not being interested in that, not wanting to dig in and learn and gather all the information that they possibly could. You know, it's time we really do address this, that we are not alone, that there are other civilizations out there, and not trying to sound like this is a religious kind of thing, but the philosophical and the psychological implications for the human race are staggering. Do you realize what it might do to our view of ourselves and the petty problems we deal with continually? Politics, ethnic origins, fights, arguments. There are wars going on right now. if we could realize that we weren't alone, that we were part of a much larger community, that idea in itself might bring about some kind of an expansion of consciousness in people, which I think would be good for the human race.
In any case, we have to remember that the security of the power structure depends on the anonymity of the Majestic 12.
Now that we can no longer use the Russians as the evil empire, we can use the aliens to increase the budget of our defense appropriations.
What we tell the Congressional Appropriations Committee is another story.
See, there are many opinions in government on how to handle the UFO information. As you know, some high-ranking officials in the administration want to release the facts. The question is how we can do that without having egg on our face.
It's only a matter of time until the general public finds out anyway. We expect that there will be a lot more contact with ETs in the 90s on a global scale.
We've got to get control of this UFO situation because, gentlemen, peace is not good for business.
Peace is good for business, General. Pollution control, cleaning up the environment, repairing the ozone layer are billion-dollar businesses. We could have a zero jobless rate. Developing peaceful new technologies could replace the defense budget.
The only answer to the question of UFOs is that there is no answer. All we can do is to be prepared for anything that may occur in our relationship with the extraterrestrials. We must keep an open mind. We've got to go into the future without fear. Gentlemen, we're entering a new decade, a new century, and a new age of mankind.
At this point, we'll have to continue our meeting in a closed-door session. Thank you for your participation and your valuable insight.
I tried to be what others wish to see, never showing the other side of me.
もし地球に他の惑星からの生物が現れて我々を脅迫したら、私たちは2つの国に横たわるいかなる相違点をも忘れ、同じ惑星の同じ人類であるということを思い知るだろう。ゴルバチョフへ、ロナルド・レーガン大統領。人々が天空よりこの地上に舞い降りた。12世紀から13世紀ヘブライの書物より、我々の理解を超越した存在が今自分の前に現れている。ソ連科学者ミトロバン・チェベレフ博士。兆しは増えている。空には赤青緑に光るものが現れ、何者かが我々に会うためにやってきたのである。その出会いはすでに起きているが、実際に見た人々は口を閉ざしている。ローマ法王ヨハネ22世1935年。